Director for the agency. And this afternoon, we're excited to bring you a session which is all about Pennsylvania's Steelhead program. And I am pleased to welcome several Fish and Boat Commission experts in the area of steelhead. Craig Lucas is the manager of the Fairview State Fish Hatchery in Erie County. Tim Wilson is a fisheries biologist in Steelhead Country up there in Fisheries Management Area 1. And Mike Hosack is a fisheries biologist with the Lake Erie Research Unit. So I want to say welcome to all of you.
Hi, Mike.
Hello.
All right. As a reminder to anyone watching us as we stream live here this afternoon on Facebook, your questions are welcomed, and we'll get to as many relevant questions as we can as we talk with our experts over the next 40 minutes or so. Remember, if we don't have the answers to all of your questions, we'll try to get to those in responses over the next several days. But we will be trying to go over the most frequently asked questions about our Steelhead program. And a reminder that you can find plenty of Steelhead answers and resources about the fishery at our website, fishandboat.com. All right, so to kick things off, I think we should probably take a couple of minutes here and get to know our guests. And Craig, we'll start with you. If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your background and how it led to a career with the Fish and Boat Commission and ultimately the Steelhead program.
Yeah, I just grew up hunting and fishing and took the opportunity went to Mansfield University out in Tioga County for fisheries biology. Graduated there in 2002. Started work with the Fish Commission. I did my internship in 2000 while I was still in school, right in the Area 2 office up on the hill here at Tynesta, and worked a couple seasons up there. Got hired as a fish culturist 1 seasonal at Corey. Got hired full-time there. Took a promotion to Tynesta as a foreman, and now I'm the manager of Tynesta and Fairview Hatcheries, in charge of this great steelhead program. I'm having lots of fun doing it.
All right, well, looking forward to talking to you. A wealth of knowledge on the subject. I spent a little time with you up there in Trout Run in Waders, so I know that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Tim,
you missed yesterday.
Yeah, and yesterday you guys had a collection up there. All right, Tim, same question for you. Just a little bit about your background, please.
Also a lifelong hunter and fisherman. After a stint in the Marines, I went to Penn State and got a degree in wildlife and fisheries science and bounced around between seasonal jobs. Finally got on with the Fish and Boat Commission in 1997 as a technician 1, and I've worked my way up over the years. I started down in the Harrisburg area, and I've worked in 5 of the 9 fisheries management areas, and now I'm the senior biologist in Fisheries Management Area 1, and I've been here for about 13 years.
All right. Fisheries biologist Mike Hosack is joining us by phone this afternoon. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about what led you to the Fish and Boat Commission.
Well, I think all of our backgrounds are pretty similar. I grew up hunting and fishing, too, and always had a strong appreciation for the outdoors and the environment. And I also had a lot of interest in biology, science, statistics and all of that. And so I began my education at Penn State. I majored in biology, and then I did a master's at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point in fisheries management. I did some work out in Idaho on a glacial lake with lake whitefish, a species of salmonid we have here in Lake Erie. And then after that, I went to work directly for the agency in the Southeast office in our Area 6. And I spent a year there, and then I came up here to Erie in August of 2009, and I've been working for the Lake Erie Research Unit since.
All right, great. Well, thank you, all of you, and once again, appreciate you taking the time. And a reminder that we've got these experts with us here for the next 45 minutes or so through about 2 o'clock. And I just will remind everyone that if you have questions, now would be the time to post those on Facebook, and we hope to get to as many questions as we can about Pennsylvania Steelhead program. So, Tim, I guess as we jump into this virtual session, probably the most obvious question of them all, but believe me, there are plenty of Pennsylvanians who've never been to the northwest corner. And if you've never been to the northwest corner up in Erie County, it's a simple question. What's a steelhead, and where do we find them?
Oh, there's a simple and a complex answer. The simple answer is steelhead are rainbow trout. There's no difference between the two. They're not a separate species. However, rainbow trout are capable of several different life histories. In the Pacific Northwest, where they're native, some will stay stream residents year-round. but many will run out to the saltwater, to the ocean, spend 3 to 5 years maturing, then they'll return to freshwater to spawn. And that's called an anadromous fish, like all the Pacific salmons. We soon learned here in Pennsylvania that if you stock them into streams, they can run out to freshwater, and that would serve as like the ocean type environment out west. They can mature out in the freshwater and return to freshwater to spawn. And so that's called patadromous. But so there's no physical difference between those and rainbow trout. They just have separate life histories, and they're adaptable between the two.
So when you say that, what you mean is we stock them in the tributaries, the small streams, and then in their minds, Lake Erie is like an ocean.
Correct. And they're imprinted on that stream the way the western fish are imprinted on the rivers where they're spawned. And so for the most part, the fish that we put in, they'll smoltify, which means they'll transfer from a juvenile stage to a mature, say a juvenile stage, from an immature stage to a juvenile stage, and they'll run out and spend anywhere from 2 to 5 years out in the lake maturing, and then they return to spawn. Unlike other Pacific salmon that spawn once and die, steelhead are capable of then returning back to the lake and spawning multiple seasons in a row.
All right. Well, as mentioned earlier, I've spent some time along with Craig and the gang and waders and with some pretty large nets with something that you guys do every year, which is as we take our viewers here today from the egg to the to the smolt to the adult fish that comes back and spawns. It all starts with our hatchery system and our egg collection. So our producer for this session is Andy Desco. Andy, I'm going to ask you if you would queue up a video for us right now on the Steelhead program, and we'll take a couple minutes just to watch this, and we'll be back and we'll talk about what we've just seen. And this was taken in 2019.
The Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission's Steelhead program begins on the shores of Lake Erie.
We're at Avonia Beach at our nursery water for trout run. We're out here collecting steelhead brood for our steelhead program. We're up here hoping to get somewhere around 700 steelhead adults that we'll take back to the hatchery. We'll sort them, males and females, and proper weight. Then the following week, next Wednesday, is when we'll actually do a spawn on them. We're fortunate today. We have a group of Oil City High School students here to help us out today. We have some volunteers from Clarion University. I have some state reps, a senator. It's real nice for us to have all this help out here.
All right, well, just hand that front right up to me there, all females. We got all females right in here, trying to separate males and females before we get to the hatch to get a count on them so we know how many we're going to need for spawn.
So every fish that's caught from the trout run collection site is brought back to the Fairview hatchery. They're all put into a designated pen. Soon after they're in the designated pen, we set up barrels with aqueous, which is an anesthetizing drug for the fish. We then weigh the fish. Each fish, male and female, are injected with a liquamycin antibiotic drug into the eggs or into the gametes of the male, which helps us prevent whole water disease in our hatch house.
All right, so we got a female here. We're squirting the eggs into the colander here. This is the first of 5 they're going to go in here. After they get drained and rinsed off here, they'll go into these buckets, and then the milk from the males that will come next will get stirred into there. And that's it.
Once we actually use the fish for the spawning method, all the fish are returned back to the lake.
Next, the fertilized eggs undergo a salt rinse before a 30-minute bath in a disinfectant iodine solution. UV-treated water from the Tionesta hatchery is used to rinse and then pack the eggs. From Fairview, the eggs are transported to both the Tionesta and Linesville hatcheries to be hatched and grown to juvenile-sized steelhead called smolts.
We stock steelhead smolts in the early spring, March, April. They'll actually imprint on that stream where we put them at. and then they'll come back the following, hopefully within 2 or 3 years, they'll swim out to the lake and grow out nice and big on all the bait fish out there. They come back and for the anglers to catch them. This is all bought and paid for with fishing license dollars. Your Lake Erie stamp, trout stamp, it all goes into partly paying for any of the programs we do up here in the Lake Erie watershed.
All right. So again, that was taken in 2019 up there along Trout Run, the nursery water, which is very close to the Fairview hatchery. Craig, I know that you've collected your share of steelhead from Trout Run over the years.
Just a few.
All right, let's get a little bit more in depth. So this is your turn. I understand you have a short presentation about the steelhead program from the hatchery perspective.
Yeah.
And Andy, if you want to cue that up for Craig. And tell us a little bit about this this presentation that we're about to take a look at.
It was a presentation I had to give to the Pennsylvania Steelhead Association meeting a couple, I think it's 2 springs ago. They just asked me to come through and give them a little rundown of what we do and where everything comes from.
And Mike and Tim, I just assume you guys have participated in collection before in all parts of that process. So was that familiar what you guys just saw? Any comments on that video?
Actually, it wasn't really part of my job until this pandemic year. I'd seen them do it, but I really didn't participate. We're usually doing our own thing that time of year. But with the pandemic, we were able to go up and assist. And so I've helped them collect fish and I've helped them spawn fish, which is not something I normally do.
Yeah, but it's a lot of fun though.
It is. It's a great group of guys. It is enjoyable, and it's nice to really do something that helps the program out.
Yeah, your help's greatly appreciated.
That is one thing. With the COVID-19 issue, all those great volunteers like those school groups and other folks aren't able to participate. It's a great learning experience too. So Craig, if you want to go ahead and walk us through a little bit about this through your presentation, we'll learn a little bit more from you.
Yeah, we'll just blast through this, so you can skip this slide. Next slide, Andy.
We'll give Andy a minute here to get this going. Every once in a while, we run into a little bit of a tech issue here when it comes to presenting this type of media, whether it's a photo or a video or a PowerPoint presentation. So, well, let's begin. I know you know the presentation fairly well, but when it comes to the hatchery program, that video is just a small glimpse of a particular moment in time that's something that happens several times a year. Would you like to tell us about how many times you guys collect?
Yeah, we typically do 8 collections and 8 spawns for every season. I can't say every year because the steelhead spawning season runs from the fall and winter of one year into the early spring of another year. So like this season is considered the 2021 season. So we start collecting fish in usually around the second week of November, and then we'll end sometime around usually the second week of February. So that spreads the takes out. It keeps our hatch house from being too crowded. Although we're jammed up right now in our hatch house, we got probably nearly 1 million fry hatched off already from just these few collections we've done this year, or spawns. Our 8th spawn will be tomorrow, actually. So we'll be busy with that. We look for somewhere around 4 million eggs that we use to get our up to around 1 million steelhead smolts that we stock out every year. We're capped by the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission at a 1.1 million some want is going into Lake Erie. So we do right around 1 million steelhead and then like another 100,000 brown trout designed specifically for the nearshore fishery program. So, and then we offer up another 100,000 or so to the co-ops up there that help us out and grow a handful of them for us. So it's a pretty good program. It really helps the fishery up there. Get great returns, especially this last couple years and stuff. Surprisingly, with as many walleyes out in the lake, the steelhead program looks to be doing really well. And the size of the fish this year is actually pretty surprising. We're getting some small fish for a couple years, and then this year, like all the 7, 8, 9, 10 pounders showed up. So we're pretty happy with that. Lots of nice fish to spawn, and we're creeping right on 4 million eggs right now. And this next spawn will take us probably just a little bit over 4 million. And we haven't had to use as many fish either. Didn't even get into Godfrey Run this year as our other nursery water. Trout Run was our sole source of brood fish this year.
Let's talk about the number of steelhead that are, that we put in each tributary. So when we look at a map of the tributaries, are they, I see that, for instance, and while we can't view this presentation online, Elk Creek seems to be an area that a lot of the smolts are stocked into, and around 244,000. And then there's some. Go ahead.
Elk Creek's one of the biggest tributaries in our portion of Lake Erie, so it gets the bulk of the steelhead smolts. Walnut Creek gets another big share of them. It's right around 185,000. 20 Mile clear out on the east side of Erie County gets another 111,000. Crooked Creek is somewhere around that number, 100,000. And the Bay gets a pretty good share of them too. The Bay fishery is actually pretty fun for the steelhead.
Got it.
And they're just spread out. It's all based, the numbers stocked. Tim could probably help out a little bit with this too, but it's based off of surface area of the water and access to Elk Creek. We have lots of easements and properties that we own and have permanent easements through, and make it access for the anglers that much better on those bigger streams that we have easements for.
Right. The bigger tribs get more fish, and the more popular streams get more fish. And so, and you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket anyway. So we like spreading them out. And a lot of people like to fish some of the out-of-way tributaries like Raccoon Creek or 7 Mile. And if you don't want to stand in a crowd, you can hike in and fish a spot that maybe's not got 10 guys gathered around the pool.
Mike, you also had a presentation to share, and I did just get a message from Andy, and this can be anticipated, but we, every once in a while we run into, we'll go to Plan B here as we continue to talk about the Steelhead program. But let's talk about what we can, including from the fishery standpoint. How do we know each year, Mike, how strong the fishery is and how strong the steelhead run is, so that anglers can keep an eye on that and say, hey, it's a good steelhead year or not, and I should take some time to head up to Erie County?
Did we lose Mike?
If we did, then Tim, you can handle that one.
Can you repeat the question again?
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, there
he is. Hey, Mike.
Sorry, I forgot that I muted my phone.
It happens. It happens.
Yeah, I was going to say prior to 2013, there really wasn't any way to know what was going on in the fishery other than through like anecdotal information, anglers posting information online or whatever, sharing information with each other. But beginning 2013, our office started a logbook program, an angler diary. Basically, we recruited volunteers to go out and record their fishing data for us. And so beginning around that time, we tried to get around 40 people to participate, and some years they provided hundreds of trips worth of data for us. So That right now is pretty much the only source of like quantifiable data we have on how well the fishery is performing. We don't actually like track the physical return of fish to the streams, but we do have the data that tracks the performance of the fishery over time. So that's the closest we have for that. And I have estimates of that data in this in the presentation that we can't show today, but let me pull it up here. I have a copy on my computer.
Sure.
Okay. The past few seasons have been the best seasons so far in the 8-year period of the survey in terms of the catch rate, or how many steelhead each angler catches per hour. You can think of it if the catch rate is like 0.5 fish per hour, it would take an angler 2 hours to catch on average 1 fish. So for the first several years of the survey, from like 2013 through 2017, the catch rate was roughly like 0.3 fish per hour. But the past 3 years, it's like doubled to between 0.6 to nearly 0.7 fish per hour. So there has been a noticeable improvement in the performance of the fishery in the past several years, and there's good reason to think that will continue this year. And so that data there is pretty much that's what we have to go on.
And generally speaking, angler catch rate is directly related to the number of fish in the creek. So if anglers are catching more fish, it means more fish are returning.
Ideally, yes.
It looks like, guys,
interpret that data.
It looks as if we're back online, and thank you for bearing with us through a little bit of a tech glitch there. We're going to see if Andy can. Looks like we've got this presentation queued up for you, Mike. If you want to take us through a little bit about the presentation that you recently gave that we can now share here during our virtual outdoor expo. This is about Lake Erie tributary fisheries, steelhead. We'll just stick with the steelhead section and keep brown trout for another time. But
okay,
Andy,
you can do that. There's a lot of information towards the end regarding the logbook survey that I just described after brown trout. So, and some of the information for steelhead has been it's been talked already. We've discussed that already, like stocking levels. But we could look at that some more.
Sure. Let's just go through the first few slides here so that we can get back on track. And I do have some questions that I want to get to from Facebook, but I also want to continue our program here so that we get a good base before we head into answering questions that we might have answered already. So go ahead, Mike, take us through what we see here on the screen right now.
Okay, well, this is just a layout of the presentation. We can go past this. Okay. Yes, this, as we've discussed, the steelhead fishery is called a put, grow, and take fishery. So the fish are released, they grow, they come back, and they're harvested. Okay, this slide just compares our stocking program. The next few slides basically compare our stocking program to our partner agencies on Lake Erie when they stock. Their average length of fish stocked, which is an important, very important parameter for how likely the fish are to survive once they enter the lake and return as adults. We try to get around roughly like 180 millimeter fish. I think that leads to optimal returns to the fishery. And you can see the numbers. We stock twice as much as the nearest agency closest to us, Ohio. Stocks 500,000 roughly a year. So we can continue through this. Okay, this is just another slide that shows the number stocked over time. It's a time series. We're the green at the bottom. So obviously, I mean, as we've stated before, we stock the most fish out of any of the other jurisdictions on Lake Erie, and consistent amount from year to year. This shows a different proportion of different species, different salmonid species stocked by all the agencies on Lake Erie, and you can see that steelhead trout comprise the bulk of all salmonid stocked in the Lake Erie, and that's been consistent through decades. This is just our agency, the Fish and Boat Commission yearling stocked. Over time, the proportion of different species, and right now, steelhead, lake trout, brown trout are species stocked. Historically, we stocked Chinook and Coho salmon too, but we can continue. Okay, a lot of this has already been discussed by Craig earlier, so we can go through some of these slides that detail the stocking. Okay, we can continue through this. Yes, one point to mention is there's really very little documented natural recruitment to the fishery through natural reproduction in the populations. There is some, but it's marginal, and it would not be sufficient to maintain a population of steelhead in Lake Erie.
And so that's the
At least
answer
not through Pennsylvania, through our waters. There
right.
could be more in the northern part of the lake where the water quality is better, but
that's a basic question then that a lot of people would ask is simply why do we stock? And
that's why we stock, because we could never sustain a fishery on the magnitude that we have through natural reproduction. It would be impossible. We probably couldn't sustain any appreciable natural reproduction in the absence of stocking, or any natural reproduction period. This shows just in general the locations where we stock fish. There's been an attempt, we've tried to move these locations upstream further. Since I think around 2010, 2012, we tried to find more upstream locations to stock fish, to give the fish longer to imprint, because we learned that some of a portion of our fish were not returning to our waters, they were returning to higher waters, in New York waters, and we thought if we could give them more time in the stream when they're stocked before they head out to the lake, they have more time to imprint on the chemical signatures in our waters so that they don't get confused when they come back and stray elsewhere. So we've done that wherever we could. And that's just showing west side stocking locations and this east side stocking locations.
Just to give some perspective about how far from the Lake Erie shoreline are people fishing for steelhead? Do you have to be very close? I've seen people fishing, right in, within 100 yards of the lake. But when you say we try to get further away and have them imprint further, exactly how far inland are we talking about?
I'm not sure about the exact details, but the purpose of this isn't necessarily to bring the fish further up the streams. It's just to ensure that when they return to our waters and not to other states' waters. But maybe Tim or
if you can see, if you look closely on the slide, the river mile of the stocking point is given right there by the little red triangle. So on Walnut Creek, those fish are stocked 13 miles from the mouth. And a lot of that depends on the obstructions in the creek that may or may not prevent the fish from making it to the lake. And then a lot of the fishing is determined by barriers that prevent the fish from traveling farther upstream. Places like 4 Mile and 7 Mile have numerous man-made and natural barriers, and so the majority of the fishing is down near the mouth, where Elk Creek has virtually no barriers, and you can fish it all the way up to that 13.3 mile marker and even farther in Elk Creek, and expect to find fish that have run from the lake.
Got it. That's exactly what I meant. Yeah, so that's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, and just because we stock the smolts at a spot, especially on Elk Creek, I think the stocking location is like 18 miles from the mouth of the lake, or the mouth of the lake, and the fish run past that location. So there's probably almost 25 to 30 miles of Elk Creek that have steelhead in it.
All right. For a period of time, we were taking advantage of certain structures on a couple of our streams to collect assessment data on the population of adult steelhead returning each year. One location was Godfrey Run, where there was a weir constructed. At some point, I believe in the 1970s, we took advantage of that for a period of time before there was too much vandalism at the site. We weren't able to continue the survey, but it did provide excellent data. And then there's the annual broodstock collections that take place at Trout Run. So we're just going to go quickly into these assessments, primarily the one at Godfrey Run. So we did Godfrey Run for about 2010 to 2017. We correlated the runs with flows. Higher flows led to greater runs. We noticed the size of adult fish had declined over time through a period of time, and we noticed more and more jacks in the population, which are precocious males that become sexually mature at a smaller age, younger age and smaller size, and there were less more desirable fish in the population, age 4 and older fish. And in 2016, survey discontinued in 2017. So we can continue. This shows some of the data we collected from Godfrey Run. This is mean length of adult steelhead trout returning to the weir over time. And you can see there is a decline in the mean length beginning in 2010 through 2016. And decline was more noticeable for male fish than female fish, and it's likely because of the increased proportion of jack steelhead we observed. We can continue. And this plot kind of makes that more evident, the jack steelhead. This is length on the bottom axis, proportion on the left, proportion of the fish of the different length classes, and year on the other axes. And each row is a different year, and you can see that a little extra mode on the left, that's those jackfish that are showing up, those precocious males that we observed those years. And unfortunately, this data does end in 2017, so we weren't able to track the data to the present. But that's not due to any fault of our own. We did experience a lot of stolen, some of our equipment and everything was stolen from that location. It's a very private location. It's a difficult area to work. But, okay, we can go forward. This is a box plot, a time series plot of weight over time in pounds, split by sex. So on the left plot is males, the right plot are females. This data is this is all data, so this is not just the weir data. This is steelhead that we catch on the lake. This is fish from Trout Run potentially mixed in. And it documents the decline in weight of male steelhead over time in years up to 2017. And less of a change in females, or no change at all. We can continue. And this shows this is a plot, another time series plot of length over time. These are steelhead smolt size at stocking. So the dashed blue line indicates what we're trying to target. We want to get fish about 7 inches in length. The literature, the scientific literature suggests that, and some of our own experiments were conducted earlier in our agency suggest that that's the optimal size to stock fish, because that maximizes the number of fish returning if you stock them at that size. And for a period of time, we were falling well below that target. But when there was renewed focus on trying to reach that target, once we realized that we had fallen behind and it was affecting the fishery, we quickly achieved it and even exceeded it. And that's one. Sometimes there's an issue with exceeding that too, because that can have effects on the fishery too, such as perhaps more jack steelhead returning if the growth rates are too high. But so we can continue. Okay, I just broke this up into 2 different types of like our actions we can take as an agency, what we can affect. Population, I broke it down like population levers and fishing quality levers, just things we can pull to kind of affect the fishery, other than, because most of what happens, a lot of what happens in these fisheries, fisheries on the lake, perch, walleye, it's driven by the environment, things we really have little to no control over as a management agency. But with this fishery in particular, we do have a lot of control over. So we can continue. Okay, we can just go quickly through these slides. Sea lamprey is a huge problem in the lake for every species of fish, especially soft-bodied fish like salmonids. Continue. We can skip past this. These are just detailed slides of the life history of the sea lamprey. I don't know if we want to spend too much time on.
No, that's fine. I think you've gotten us far enough there. This is great information. Appreciate that, Mike. And again,
good
for sticking with us there as we're back on track here, talking about the Steelhead program. So basically, what we saw there was some data that told a story up until about 2017. But I guess what we deal with now, Tim, is a fishery that's still a thriving fishery based on the number of people who are participating. There's a Sea Grant study out there that estimated the total economic impact, of recreational fishing in the Lake Erie region just for Pennsylvania at about $40.6 million a year, and a lot of those are steelhead trips. And that's not possible without all the work that Craig, yourself, and Mike and others are doing up there, from hatchery to proper management. So let's go ahead and change the focus now to fishing and get to a couple of questions. As we talk a little bit about this, Andy has some video that he's going to queue up that just sort of shows a couple of fellas out there last season fishing along Elk Creek. So as we take a look at that, there's no audio associated with this video. We can just talk over it. But guys, so that we can set up some of the questions that we're getting, a couple of basic things. Tim, what kind of fishing license do I need to go steelhead fishing, and what is the Creo limit?
Well, if you're 16 years or older, you'll need a fishing license. If you're a resident of PA, you need a resident fishing license. If you're from out of state, you'll need a non-resident fishing license. And then you'll have to get a Lake Erie permit. And to fish for steelhead, you'll have to have a trout and salmon permit. You can buy what's called a combo that includes both of those permits for a reduced price. And that's what you need to fish in Lake Erie and all of the tributaries to Lake Erie.
This looks like a common method of fishing here that we're seeing. Craig, can you describe what's going on here? I think he's about to land a big one.
Yeah, they're just fishing an area on Elk Creek known as the Mud Hole. It's right below the Elk access. The creek, there's a boat launch there that you can get some small boats out of and fish Lake Erie or kayaks or anything like that. But yeah, they're using it. Bobbers are real popular up there, strike indicators, whatever you want to call them. They're still a bobber to me. Just use that, and they put a little jig underneath it, like mini food jig, but a lot of guys are tying their own stuff with their own concoction of colors and everything like that. But most of the time, these things get to the size they are by just pounding on emerald shiners out in the lake. And so that's what everything tries to match up with. And those jigs, a lot of times, will tip them with some maggots or spikes or even emerald shiners and stuff just to give it a little extra scent for them. But yeah, they're a lot of fun to catch. Jigging for them is a lot of fun. But you need water like what they have down there for the jigging to work really well. Up in the flowing sections where it's moving along a lot more, like the riffle run pool sections, and you can usually just get away with just drifting your bait or flies.
So it looks like this guy's got a couple that he's going to keep, and the other fellow there was returning one back to the water. Little, just to sure that they were having some good action on the creek that day.
Yeah.
So that was definitely aptly named if that place is called the Mud Hole because it was muddy.
Yeah.
So, Tim, you mentioned the daily Creo limit for people was how many fish is that per day?
It's 3 fish per day. You have to remember that this is a put, grow, and take fishery. We do not rely on the fish in any of the tributaries to spawn, to reproduce, to maintain the fishery. So we don't really have to protect the brood stock. We do that by not allowing fishing in Trout Run. That's our brood stream. And Godfrey Run, same thing. So it's kind of a compromise between protecting the fishery and spreading out the number of fish amongst the fishermen, but still making it some place that someone, if you don't want to drive 3 hours from Pittsburgh to only take 1 fish home. So it's kind of a compromise between making it desirable to come up here and fish, but still preserving and spreading the fish out amongst the anglers. So you can't take home 10, and there's certainly many anglers out there who can catch 10 plus in a day. So their max is 3, so the rest have to go back. So that's how we distribute those fish amongst the fishermen.
And we did have a question from Chris on Facebook who was asking regarding how we take a look at establishing the Creo limits and if we ever considered, increasing size requirements or decreasing, the Creo limit, which you just addressed there, as continuing to provide a quality opportunity for people to keep a couple. If the Creo limit was lower, some people might not make the trip.
Right, and we've been pushing for this. It's a very expensive proposition, but we would like to we'd have to perform a Creo survey and find out exactly how many fish are being harvested and how many guys are taking home 2 and how many guys are taking home 3 or 1. And that would determine whether or not it's worth it to protect it. And a lot of our fisheries, most people don't take home the limit. I do a lot of fishing. Almost all of my steelheading is catch and release, and I see mostly that along a lot of the creeks. Certain areas are known to be places where if you want to go harvest a fish, that's the place to go. Things like the mouth of Walnut. But the vast majority of the angling is catch and release angling, and the actual amount of harvest is fairly low. But we would have to measure that before we make a decision on changing it. But we like it where it is right now.
Another question has to do with someone was under the impression that we were stocking fewer fish. Is that a misconception based on the data that Mike just presented there, that the Fish and Boat Commission is stocking over 1 million fish?
We hover right around the million. Sometimes a little under, sometimes a little over. But we're right around 1 million. They might be under the impression for the stock trout stuff, but the Steelhead program has been right around 1 million for as long as I've been here, since 2011.
Got it. I have someone with a question about we talked about that technique using the bobber. What else? Do you need any specialty equipment to get out and steelhead fish, or is the same type of rod and reel that I might use for, a typical trout stream okay? I just might want to bulk up the line and hooks, or is there actually some secrets to the trade for the guys who are good at it?
There's definitely secrets to it, but you can get away with some regular trout gear on it. See guys with their little 4-foot ultralights out there all the time land fish. But long, soft rods help protect the light leaders you need. Fluorocarbon's a huge thing to use up there for the line. You want to use as light as line as you can get away with as far as for landing the fish, but you also don't want to take up the entire hole if you're trying to land a fish on 2-pound test when there's 15 other guys standing around you waiting for you to land your fish, because most of the time they're courtesy enough that everyone will let you land your fish while you're fighting with it. I generally use 5X or 4-pound test almost the entire year. The water's a little bit colored. You can bounce up to 6-pound or 3X. But the long rods help protect those soft leaders. Doesn't matter if you're fly fishing or spin fishing. Center pinning's become really popular up there. They can cover a lot of water with it, and it's the same deal with their lines. You run a heavy main line and then tie it off to a light leader.
Mike, you mentioned... Oh, sorry, Craig. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was going to see if I missed anything, because Tim's up there fishing with me quite often. So,
if you say you're new up there, the guys will help you tremendously. They love to see new anglers catch steelhead, and they will help you land your fish. They'll teach you how to fish. They'll give you pointers on tackle, on bait, on presentation. It's a rather communal fishery. The guys are very nice. They'll net fish for you. So don't be afraid to go up there as a newbie. You'll be welcomed right in for the most part. There are certain bits of etiquette that you need to learn. If someone says fish on, you got to pull your line out and let them fight their fish. But I encourage people to go give it a try. They're really nice to new people, and they'll really help you catch fish and get into the sport.
Mike, you
Yeah, those,
mentioned.
sorry.
Let's just move on to the next question here, as I got another. We got another one here that is relevant to what Mike was talking about when talking about some obstructions and the ability for fish to pass, on certain tributaries upstream. And so the question is, do we have any plans for fish ladders or other devices? Have we ever, let's as opposed to maybe talking about plans, let's talk about what we do use or what we have done as far as ways to increase fish passage on the Lake Erie tributaries.
My office is kind of taking the lead on that, so I'll go ahead and answer that one. Well, currently there's actually only 3 fish passage structures that have been installed, man-made fish structures, 2 on 4 Mile Creek and 1 on Crooked Creek. And they are functioning. They require quite a bit of maintenance. What we're learning is because of the nature of the creeks up there, that it's actually perhaps better to remove the barriers versus build something additional to get around them. So we're in the process of beginning. We've got a demonstration project on Lower 4 Mile Creek. People can go down there and see it. It's between the dam and the golf course and the mouth of the lake at the lake. And we've basically cut artificial channels through these waterfalls. And this was the first year for the one on 4 Mile Creek, and it has worked tremendously. It has passed way more fish than ever passed in the previous years, and it seems to be working. It seems to be durable, and so we've got plans to install this type of construction on some of our other tributaries that have major waterfalls that prevent fish migration, steelhead migration. We do have to be careful. We have to allow steelhead to pass, but not allow sea lampreys to pass. So that requires a certain amount of engineering. But we do have projects ongoing to improve the steelhead reaching farther up into a lot of these tributaries to areas that are open to public fishing.
Fish passage, is that different than habitat? We have a question about habitat as well, wondering if we have specific types of habitat projects along the tribs that are good for steelhead.
Fewer habitat projects. Habitat, especially in steelhead country, basically means probably carving out pools or resting areas for the fish or concentration areas where anglers can get to them. A lot of our tributaries have extensive riffle areas, which the fish can easily get by, but they're not good areas to concentrate fish for anglers. And so we have not done much of that. Most of that work was done at the mouth of Walnut Creek. If you can still see some of the legacy rebar and logs that we used to create plunge pools to hold fish. The problem again with putting things in the creek in the Lake Erie watershed is when you get ice out, you get these huge icebergs moving down, and they will scour out any man-made object you try to place in the creek. So we're trying to come up with a unique way to create habitat that's self-cleaning and durable without putting a lot of logs and rebar in the creek. But right now, we're mostly concentrating on fish passage, getting fish to where anglers can get to them.
Guys, we're approaching, the 2:00 hour. I want to thank you for spending so much time with us. We've got a few questions on Facebook, and I think people have appreciated seeing some of the data that you presented here today and answering a few questions. So with that, I want to give you each an opportunity just to wrap things up. And I think the question I'll throw to Mike as we wind things down, Mike, is just in general, I would say,
until I was getting ready to cross the street.
How should people feel about the status of Pennsylvania steelhead fishery, and should we be excited about the future? And is it something that I could get involved in if I'm looking for a new challenge?
Yeah, I think people should definitely be excited about it. It's I think the available data shows that we have the best steelhead fishery possibly in the world here. the catch rates are higher here than they are in their native range, higher than in any other jurisdiction on Lake Erie. This is the place where you go to catch, catch huge trout. I mean, it's here in Pennsylvania, and it doesn't take a great deal of expertise to catch them. I think the future looks great for steelhead. We were worried about how the huge population of walleye in the lake, how that would affect the survival of steelhead, but they seem to be thriving in the face of that. So I think some of that is maybe more some of the what affects the number of steelhead returning appears to maybe not be so much predation related, maybe more related to the status of the environment and to the amount of available forage in the lake to support the population. So I think the future looks great for steelhead. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the third part of your question.
I think Tim probably answered the third part of my question, was just about, is it something that I should be, if I'm looking for a new challenge, is it something that I can jump into? And Tim, you talked a little bit about the the camaraderie that takes place up on the streams, and if you wanted to talk a little bit more about what you're doing this time of year related to the Steelhead program, and give us a final thought, we'd be happy to hear it.
Well, right now with the cold weather, we're kind of in a little bit of a lull, but in a winter that's perhaps a little bit warmer, you could still be up there catching steelhead. They're in the creeks from October all the way through the end of March. There should be a smaller fresh run here coming when the ice breaks up, the spring spawners, so to speak. And but if you can find an open pool, there's probably going to be steelhead in it. And generally speaking, unless the water is really, really cold and the air temperature is really cold, they're usually going to be biters. Early in the morning's good. Like most other predators, they're active at dawn and dusk, but they can be caught all day long. The highest use is in October and November when it's most crowded. If you can find a nice day in January, February, and March, quite often you can have some of the better holes all to yourself. So dress warmly. It's cold, but the fish are there to be caught.
Good advice. Good advice. And another question that we have here that came in just relates to, we talked about the tributaries, but before we go, let's talk about Presque Isle Bay. Are we stocking steelhead in Presque Isle Bay, and what's the approach for people fishing there? Just a different experience?
It's a different experience. There's a lot of pier fishing that goes on in Presque Isle Bay. Yeah, the North Pier, the East Pier, the West Pier, any of this stuff on the city side. Guys catch them on our incidental catches while they're perch fishing. Just even in there fishing for bluegills and stuff in the spring, the steelhead are in there cruising around, and they'll eat the little tiny ice jigs. Ice fishermen catch them all the time. It's just a neat little niche to the fishery up there. We stock about 83,000, 85,000, something like that, Tim.
Yeah,
somewhere around there. So, and then there's actually a pretty good trolling fishery in there too, in the late fall and stuff. A lot of the boats go in there and just troll around for them, and you can go up there as long as it's not a big south wind. The bay's fairly calm, and you can be out there in a little 14-footer and be okay trolling for steelhead.
The main tributary that flows into the bay is a little stream called Cascade Creek, and a lot of those fish will run into the lower end of Cascade, and will provide an urban steelhead fishery right there in the city. And it's another place you can catch steel. We don't deliberately put any in Cascade, but quite a few make it into there. They're probably the fish we stock in the bay.
For many people, it would be the catch of a lifetime, and probably the largest trout they might ever catch in their lives, and they can do it right here in Pennsylvania. So I guess the last question I have, and I'm just going to leave it up to Tim or Craig to take this one home for us, but what's the deal? Is it all about smoking the steelhead when you're done with it, or what's the best way to eat your catch?
I usually let mine go, but smoking is the preferred method if I do happen to keep one and stuff. That's the main idea, and it's It's pretty good. There's lots of trade secrets with the recipes and the brining and all that stuff. Tim's probably a little bit better off at it, and he's probably more adventurous and will actually be willing to bake something like that. I'm a fat body, so I like deep fried stuff, and Steelhead doesn't deep fry very well. So I'll keep with my walleyes and perch for that.
My sister makes a pretty good teriyaki version, but I'm mostly not a salmon and trout eater. But I have smoked them, and they are really, really good that way. I do it at home, and it's simple recipes you can get online. You brine them, marinate them in the fridge for a few days, put them on the smoker. A cracker, some cream cheese, and a piece of smoked steelhead's pretty good.
Sounds good to me. I'll be over.
All right.
All right. Hey, I want to thank our guest here today, fisheries biologist Mike Hosack, fisheries biologist Tim Wilson, and Fairview hatchery manager Craig Lucas. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys here about Pennsylvania Steelhead program. I hope that if you've tuned in today on Facebook Live and watched us streaming, that you enjoyed it and you had a chance to ask a few questions and that we've been able to answer those for you. So again, a very exciting fishery. I know many Pennsylvanians who have never been to the northwest corner. I can count myself among those until recent years, and I can tell you that it's well worth the trip. And if you're a fisherman and if you want to check out something completely different, Erie is worth the drive, and the steelhead fishery is thriving. So for more information about Pennsylvania Steelhead program, as always, you can visit our website, fishandboat.com. Hope you enjoyed this presentation on YouTube, Facebook, wherever you found us today. Please like and share and help us spread the word about our virtual outdoor expo happening this week. And our next session will happen tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. when we'll talk Kayaking 101, what's behind Pennsylvania's fastest growing boating trend. So I want to thank you. Say thanks again to our guests, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm fishing in Erie County.
Yeah, it's fun. Give it a couple weeks so it warms up.
It's even better than steelhead here.
All right, see you guys.
See you, Tim.
See you later.
See you, Mike.